Okay, this will be the first of two parts for this set of notes. In this situation, what we have is this is one side, this is the other side, and what we're going to do is fold to the middle, which is basically close to that H in Houston in the middle. And then we're going to cut along the dotted lines on each side until we get to the fold. Do not cut past the fold. And this first set of notes is strictly going to be the 4 flaps that we just made. And this is dealing with 4 different ways to find slope. We can find slope from a graph, from an equation, from 2 points, or from a table. So let us first start with finding slope from a graph. So we're going to do this basically by hoping that we can find the x and y intercepts, and if we can't find x and y intercepts, then we will go along to some other points that are nice on the line. So here we have our x-intercept here, that's at 2. We have a y-intercept up here at 3. And what we're going to do is count rise over run, or our change in x over, change in y over change in x. Slope is change in y over our change in x. And what we'll do then, we'll do this one, and then we'll also do the one on the inside. So we're going to come down 3 units. So my change in y is a -3. So this is going to be a -3 over a positive change now, because we're moving to the right 2 units. So that change is +2. And for some reason, I did not write an x here. So let's make sure we have that. Change in y over change in x. And that is going to be a -3 over a +2. And when I simplify that, I simply get slope is equal to -3 over 2. So let's do another example on the inside of this flap. So here we have finding slope from a graph. Again, I'm going to look for my x and y intercepts and see if they are going to help me out. And indeed, here's one here. There's my y-intercept. And here's my x-intercept right here. So what we did there is we're going to count. We're going to go from the, well, we can go from here to here. We can go up 3. So that's a positive y change. So my change in y is a +3. And then my change in x is also a positive number. So this is my change in x, and it is a +2. So my slope is going to be my change in y over my change in x, because that's one of our definitions of slope that we saw from an earlier video. So this is change in y over change in x. My change in y was a +3 here. And the change in x was a +2. So my slope in this case was simply 3 over 2. And you just do that by counting rise over run. Remember, we are counting the x as our run. It goes on bottom. Rise goes on top. So slope is defined as rise over run. Okay. Another easy way to find the slope is from an equation. So we have our equation in slope-intercept form, where this is our slope, the m, and b is our y-intercept. What we have to do at that point is match it up with the equation. So we can see that our slope here, what lines up with what's in front of the x, is the 3. So here's our slope. And then our y-intercept is here with the -5, because remember, every number has a sign and every sign has a number. So our slope is +3. Notice I didn't write the x because the x isn't the slope. The number in front of the x is the slope. And then my y-intercept is identified as -5 because of this negative sign here. So that's how you find the slope from an equation. We can also find the y-intercept, which is nice. And then we have 2 more flaps to go, but before we do that, let's go on the inside of this flap and look at our examples here. Let's see if I can get those. Okay, so we are going to find the slope from this equation. So this equation here, we have y equals mx plus b. Here is m, so m is equal to -1/2. For this one, we also have y equals mx plus b. For this situation, m is going to be 5/4. Here, this is not written in our proper form. So if we rewrite it with the x term first, -2x plus 1, we can easily see that the slope is -2. But we also could have gotten that from the way that they had written it here, because slope is simply the number in front of the x. So we look at the x term, we find that coefficient of the x, and that is our slope. Let me do that one again. So 1 minus 2x, rewrite it as y equals -2x plus 1. So our slope is going to be -2 because -2 is the coefficient of the x term, and m, or slope, is always the coefficient of the x term. Another way, or our third way, is to find slope from a table. In this case, we're going to look at how things change over here. So we're going to have our change in y. And on this other side, we're going to have our change in x. And we're going to look at those ratios. On this side, to go from 6 to 2, that change is a -4. To go from 2 to -6, that change is a -8. To go from -6 to -10, that change is also a -4. Looking at our x, to go from -1 to 1, that is a change of +2. To go from 1 to 5, that is a change of +4. And to go from 5 to 7, that is a change of +2 again. So now we simply make our ratios. So what we have is that slope is equal to the change in y all over the change in x. So what we're going to do is look at each of these ratios. So I've got a -4 over +2. I've got a -8 all over a +4. And finally, again, I have a -4 all over +2. Now, each of these ratios must simplify to be the same in order for this to be a rate of change or a slope. -4 divided by 2 is -2. -8 divided by 4 is -2. -4 divided by 2 is also -2. So because all of these ratios simplify to be the same number, so this one simplified to -2, this one simplified to -2, and then finally the last one here, -4 over 2, also simplified to be -2, then that means our slope is going to be -2. So from a table, you find your change in y out to this side, you find your change in x here, and then you make your fractions or your ratios. If those ratios simplify to be the same, then you have found your slope. Okay, and then the last one is finding slope from 2 points. We have point 1, -2, -4, and point 2 is 2, 7. All we have to do here is label. This is x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2, and then use the formula. So right here, I'm going to say label the points, then use the formula. If you don't label your points, you are more likely to make a mistake. So please go ahead and label those points, then use the formula by using the skeleton, and we're going to show you what that is on the inside right here. So find the slope from 2 points. Okay, so let's go ahead and label our points. We have x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. Our slope formula says y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. The difference in the y's over the difference in the x's. What we do now is we make a skeleton from that formula so that we can plug in our values and then use the calculator and alpha y equals to get our final slope. So right here is y sub 2. Y sub 2 has a value of 7. Y sub 1 has a value of -4. This is another reason why we put the parentheses for our various substitution values and why we make the skeleton, because this subtract sign has nothing to do with this number here. X sub 2 is 2, x sub 1 is -2. So we have 7 minus -4, so that gives me an 11 on top. 2 minus -2 gives me a 4 on bottom. 11 over 4 will not simplify, so you are left with the slope being 11 over 4. Again, identify your points, label your points, substitute those into the formula, and then use the calculator and alpha y equals, put this in the numerator, this in the denominator, as is with the parentheses, and then you will have it simplify to the fraction for you. Now on this side, I did not do the inside of the flap, so I'm going to go back and do that now. So here we have finding slope from a table, and they've given us a different table here. So let's go ahead and do our change in y. So from -3 to 5 is a +2. No it isn't, pardon me, that's a -2. Then from -5 to -7 is a -2. And same thing for the last one. -7 to -9 is a drop of 2. For the x side, we are looking for the change in x. From 2 to 4 is a +2. From 4 to 6 is a +2. And from 6 to 8 is a +2. And every single one of these on the outside happens to be the same. So our slope, which is defined as the change in y over the change in x, is going to equal a -2 over a +2. But -2 divided by +2 is simply -1. So our slope for this one would be -1. So again, for a table, find your change in y and your change in x, and then make a ratio out of them. And on the front, we had multiple ratios to do, and we had to make sure that they simplified to be the same. To find it from an equation, you just have to find the number in front of the x, and that is your slope. So in here we had -1/2 was in front of the x, so my slope was -1/2. 5 over 4 was the coefficient of x, so it's 5 over 4. Here the coefficient of x was a -2, so my slope was -2. And then finally, remember that for finding slope from a graph, just choose 2 points on the graph, any 2 points on the graph, count the change in y to the change in x, take that ratio and simplify it, and then you will find your slope. So this is part 1. Part 2 will deal with the inside of this particular note handout.